It's that time again. It's time to talk NFL Draft on the Our Football Network here on the Prime Sports Network YouTube channel and also the Our Football Network at ourlads.com. Don't forget about our rankings videos coming out. Offense Wednesday, defense Friday, as a senior draft scout from ourlads.com, Dave Syvertsen will have all of those rankings for you. And matter of fact, you've obviously finished your rankings. I don't think you've probably had enough film in your brain that you've probably moved everything accordingly. So, any particular, like, what should the viewers expect to see when we talk about the rankings?
I mean, one thing I take pride in is I really just kind of go beat my own drum on it, right? Obviously, humble enough to listen to people and listen to advice and mentors that I have in the community. But my rankings are different, and it's all from my own opinion, right? I always act as if I put myself in a cave and you have no access to outside information. What would your ranks look like? Because this time of year, you see a lot of these ranks and mock drafts that they're just kind of repeating each other. And every single year, you see things that no one saw coming. And that's one thing I've always tried to do is just kind of beat my own drum. I know what I want to see, and I know what I don't want to see. And that really does, have a huge factor on my ending stack. So, I would love you guys to tune in and check it out because it's not going to be the norm. And if you want to bash me in the comments section, you'll have that opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. No question about that. That'll happen. But that's all part of the game. We welcome it. And we also welcome, of course, positive feedback. That includes subscribing, likes, sharing the videos and such. Let us know if there's also anything. Maybe there's a player that we haven't talked about you want Dave's opinion on. Let us know because we have several shows just before the draft. But keep in mind, we're coming right back after the draft because we have draft review shows, meaning that we're going to do pretty much the opposite, but the same. We're covering all 32 teams, and we're going to talk about all the drafts and kind of put as much of an off-season spin. And it's not over yet, but we're at that point after the draft that was probably 90% over. So we'll kind of talk about how we felt off seasons are for every team in the NFL. And so we got a lot of that. We got the draft review guide coming out. So you got to keep that in mind. The Our Lads draft guide is available. So matter of fact, that should even be ready to go out in the next couple of days, right?
It's got to be on our doorsteps within the next week. I have to imagine that's the last time. So next time before we meet on Wednesday, I'll try to get a firm answer on that.
Yeah, and again, we're going to be doing the mock draft show, and that's going to be live a week from Friday. So what's cool about the live mock draft show is because it's live, we felt it was a good time to give away PDF draft guides. So that means as soon as the show's over and whoever wins the PDF guides, we're going to maybe a handful. All we have to do is exchange email addresses, and then boom, next Friday or the 21st, sometime during that day, you'll have a PDF guide of the Our Lads 2023 NFL Draft right there for you to just do what you want with. And there's a lot, like every draft. How many players are in the guide usually, Dave?
I mean, we try to get everyone that's going to be drafted plus another 100 guys. So you're probably looking between 300 and 400 graded players.
So, and write-ups. So they're not small write-ups, pretty nicely sized. You get a lot of impact on that. So check us out for our live mock draft show on the 21st. And that'll be our last show before the draft. And then again, the following week, we'll start scheduling draft review videos. Okay, let's talk about, now we've got the AFC East and the NFC East to wrap up the team needs reports. All of the other divisions are posted. Matter of fact, we started to also post individual team videos. So we're started on that as well. This is the end with the East, and we're going to begin with the AFC East and alphabetically the Buffalo Bills. So you look at this Bills organization, been pretty steady now. Since Sean McDermott has taken over, Yes, Dayball's moved on. Dorsey is now the man in charge on the offensive side of things. But this has been a pretty stable organization, but one that really is at the point where you do wonder how many more years of not even getting to the Super Bowl will suffice regarding Sean McDermott. Because we don't know. I mean, the ownership, this is kind of still new to them. So we don't know how they run things as far as being patient. Right now, we know that they haven't been impatient, but then again, McDermott's done a good job. So there's really nothing. So it should be interesting to find out. Bills fans, let us know. I mean, what you think about Sean McDermott and how many more seasons of not even getting to a Super Bowl will be okay for you. And I would think the younger generation could also be a little bit different from the older generation who went to 4 straight Super Bowls, even though they lost 4 straight Super Bowls, but a little bit different taste there. But anyway, we value your opinion nonetheless. All right, looking at Buffalo, and they've really only made one addition on defense the entire offseason. And I'm not, and we're looking at really a guy that'll probably start, I don't know, 30, 40% of the snaps on defense, Taylor Rapp. You know, he's probably the only like real noticeable player on that side of the ball. Offensively, you look at it, and yes, they had Connor McGovern at guard, but Damian Harris to take over for Singletary is really the big move. So if you look at it, they really haven't. It's been a kind of quiet offseason so far for Buffalo. So the question with the draft is, what exactly do they need? And I really believe, and there's a couple other positions we'll go over, but I just think it's a no-brainer. I think they need multiple young players around that offensive line. I don't care how they bring those guys in, but that offensive line's got to get a little bit better.
Yeah, they have really patched together an offensive line multiple ways, and none of them really being primary assets, primary resources. They haven't used high draft picks on the offensive line. They haven't shelled out a lot of money on the offensive line. And that is a spot economically around the NFL that look around every depth chart. There's at least one premium asset used along the offensive line, at least one, right? Whether it's financial and free agency / contracts or early draft picks. And for years, I've been saying that I think this is going to be the eventual kryptonite of this team. And you could even say year after year, I've been proven wrong there because they've been good enough. But in my opinion, they haven't been good enough to get to the next level, right? Both tackle spots, Deion Dawkins, who I liked coming out of college, I thought he would be better at guard, and he has really entrenched himself as a left tackle there. Good player on the outside. The question to me is Spencer Brown at right tackle. We have 2 years of football, a lot of tape, a lot of snaps. Have we seen him got any better since the first snap of his rookie season? He allowed over 50 pressures last year. He was among league.
He might have got worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think the league started to figure him out a little bit, right? And if you remember back to his scouting report coming out of Northern Iowa, right, was that the tools were dreamy, right? Like unbelievable athlete, but he's high-hipped. He struggles with leverage. He's not fluid, right? And that really, that's the number one. It's one of the reasons why the number one thing I look for in a tackle coming out of college is how fluid and how natural they look in pass protection. And this is something that I think Buffalo is probably a little worried about on the offensive side.
Well, that developmental time, and as you mentioned, our lads had touched up on that in their scouting report. We're at that point where, I mean, he played earlier maybe than he should have, which is fine. Right. And like you said, maybe once he got out there and there was film on him after the offseason, now we know how to target him. Now he takes a step back. But now we find out, okay, now that they've targeted you, now the developmental part has to come to, we're at that season where, all right, I've gone out there. I'm trying to do my best to develop up pretty much on the fly. They've come after me. They've pretty much given me their best. Now I have got to make that move. It's 2023 is the season for him to make the move or not. And that's why you wonder whether or not it's prudent to add a right tackle. Or maybe you add a guy who has the ability to play both inside and out. Because if you look at it, I don't like Ryan Bates all that much. Connor McGovern's okay. You can live with Connor McGovern. But and I've said this for the past couple of years, actually, for the past year at least, they should also look to upgrade Mitch Morse. I mean, you could live with Mitch Morse, but the problem is when you have a Mitch Morse who's just kind of like a below average at best kind of center, and then you don't surround him with quality players, his game kind of goes down. He's not that type of guy that brings other players up. He's the kind of guy that can actually go down if the guys around him aren't very good. So that's what's going on there. And you kind of let off with it. Besides Deion Dawkins, there isn't really anything else that you have to be afraid of with this offensive line. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if they used 2 of their top 3 picks on an offensive lineman.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing this organization, Billy Beane, has done, right, as a decision maker, as the drafter for this team, right, they draft college tackles and they put them inside. All of their interior guys were college tackles. And, I mean, even the one that they got rid of in Cody Ford, right, like that, they were college tackles that probably were not lengthwise or just skill set wise ideal fits for the outside. And that's a move that it's a trend in the NFL now. And, when I do my reports for the tackles, you have 20, 22 guys that are really draftable grades, and I'd say half of them could project inside. And that's a move that I think Buffalo is going to keep feeding that monster this year, hedging what they have inside. And because I think, you can make a case that at least 2 of these guys are not going to be here next year. You draft a tackle, you give them a year to develop the guard, maybe even center skill set, and you have your starting guards / centers next year.
All right. Who, if they decided to go offensive line with their first pick?
With their first pick, I mean, a guy that I like as a tackle but could project inside, right, in this kind of situation is Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse.
Okay.
I'm a little rich
Local
on
kid.
him. Yeah, I'm a little rich on him. Not many people have a first-round grade on him. I'm like borderline first, second. Bills are at the end of the first round. Paris Johnson, I don't think he's going to fall, but this offensive line group is shaky. This is going to be a very hard to predict draft, and you are going to see certain guys drop. Do I think Paris Johnson is one of them? No. But what you can get out of Paris Johnson is a guy that the Bills could see, hey, we might want to make an aggressive move for this guy and move up for him. The guy was a former guard at Ohio State, finished his career at left tackle. So you have someone that has some experience inside. And you have someone that already has this inside-out versatility. He can do both roles. So if they wanted to get aggressive and get a starting offensive lineman and just figure out where to put him, you could trade up for a Paris Johnson. But, there's a bunch of day 2 options too. My top 2 options for tackles in college to make the move inside are Jalen Duncan from Maryland and Tyler Steen from Alabama. Okay. Skill set wise, their ugly tape in college was a lot in space, on the edge, just couldn't hang with the speed. But anything kind of on inside shoulder when they didn't have to go to the outside edge, they're very stout, very good with their hands, good size, great anchors. I think those are 2 guys to keep an eye on day 2 for the Bills to implement in that guard.
All right. Let's talk about some of these other positions. By the way, I have to ask you, what is Deontay Hardy like a special teams demon or something? Because they gave this guy a little bit of money for someone that I've never really heard of much, if at all.
I mean, he's a Pro Bowl caliber special teamer.
He must be, because unless they see something in him that I completely don't know, because he hasn't done anything as a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're the gunner, and also the fact that he knows their system. And the special teams, the return ability, right? This was a guy that for a while he was going to be the next big thing.
Was he?
When he was with the Saints, he had a few stretches of play when Sean Payton was there. They tried to make him a receiver, and it never really worked out. But
he had some decent numbers in his what was it, his first year.
Yes, first and second year.
Yeah, but last year I don't know what happened. I don't know if he just.
Sean Payton left.
There you go.
I really think he was a product of Sean Payton. I think he was the one that was pushing that button. I'm actually surprised he didn't end up in Denver, because that happens a lot. Like a coach goes to a new team, they kind of bring over their guys. But they lost Isaiah McKenzie.
Yep.
And I think Hardy's going to be the guy that is going to be a Pro Bowl potential special teamer.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I really figured the special teams had to be. Not that again, with the right. You have Josh Allen now.
Yep.
So he might be an interesting sleeper, to tell you the truth, to keep an eye on if you're looking for someone that could maybe. I think he did have like 500 yards his first year, or 21. And maybe that's what you're looking at, because that's why I brought it up, because I wondered whether or not they need some extra depth at receiver. But in reality, they really don't. They don't use the depth much unless there's an injury or two.
Right.
So I think an inline blocker, though, on tight end would definitely be something that they could use. Defensively, I don't know where do you think Bernard fits best? Because they used a 3rd-round draft pick on him. I don't know if that was either insurance in case they couldn't resign Milano, or they expect Bernard to play, maybe to take over for Tremaine Edmonds. I know we don't have that on the depth chart right now.
Right.
That's why I'm asking, because with Milano there, you don't use up a 3rd-round draft pick unless you're going to play the guy.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't get too into NFL comparisons, but I do get asked a lot. If I see something stand out, measurement, skill set wise, I'll put it in there. I'll even put it in the report sometimes. And the name that I had next to Bernard was Matt Milano. Just the style of play, the size, the speed. I mean, you're talking next level speed. But I mean, my first question I want answered with Buffalo is, what are they doing at defensive coordinator? I mean, Leslie Frazier has taken the year off from football, and I know it's McDermott's defense, but who really is in charge of the defense, or who at least is under McDermott that's in charge of the defense? And that might, alter what they're doing next to Milano. Now, they lost Edmonds to Chicago. Yes, big loss, and yes, they saw it coming. And they knew this was coming last year. So I believe Bernard's selection was the hedge here.
Okay.
That if he's not ready, they have a couple other decent options, but I think it's the number one need. And the need specifically that they need that will replace Edmonds is coverage. Right? Milano's the guy. Milano is the guy in that group. He's all over the place. He lines up everywhere. He's their best blitzer, the best pass rusher, the best run defender. Edmonds was just the freak. And you can't replace that size. I mean, Edmonds was one of the biggest ever linebackers to ever come out of college football and actually play off the ball. And you're not going to just replace that in the draft. There is no one like that in this draft. There's probably no. So I think they're going to have to shift some philosophy things with that role. They're going to take out Edmonds. No one's going to replace him. And I think Bernard's going to get the first crack at it.
Yeah.
But, he's not proven yet. And I think until you have a proven player there, and I even think you're going to have to find another backup, because Milano's been in the league. This will be his 7th or 8th year.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think you need a hedge there.
Well, our lads, actually, the scouting report on Bernard may be scheme dependent, as he projects as a will, playing behind a 3 technique.
Yep.
So right there.
And that's the spot.
Yeah.
That's the spot.
Yep. So, all right. And then also, again, to me, I think early on, it'll be a decision between one of two. Either they go with the offensive line, which I think is a definite, or, hey, you know what? The guy that we want isn't there. Let's just do what we just always seem to do, which I am completely okay with, because I don't think that it's worked the way that they've hoped that it would work, and that is draft another edge rusher.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what Rousseau is yet, and we knew he was a multi-year project, but Von Miller's not going to be around much longer. Epinesa, right? Free agent next year.
Yeah, no.
I think the entire defensive front is that needs to be in the discussion for the first pick too. Ed Oliver, free agent next year. He went backwards from 2021 to 2022. He's always been kind of this risky shot in the dark. That was a swing. That's what I mean by a swing for the fence. I use that term a lot with projecting rookies to the next level and prospects in this class, last class, right? And Ed Oliver was a swing for the fence that did not work out.
It was
not
interesting. Well, and this just shows you why you never talk about comparisons of the draft too early. You have to wait 4 or 5 years before you could go, hey, how did that work out? And what I'm talking about is the difference between the Jets drafting Quinnen Williams or Ed Oliver. Yep. Because the first year or two, there were a lot of people that were going, the Jets, you see, they should have drafted Oliver. Oliver was the better player. Hasn't turned out that way. Seems like the
Yeah.
Jets made the right call. So you don't,
Absolutely.
you got to just hold reserve on how certain players develop. But again, Oliver's been a nice player, but he hasn't lived up to where he was drafted yet.
And, their entire defensive line, I mean, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, Daquan Jones, that foursome, they're all free agents next year. And Buffalo's a team that they don't necessarily always draft for this year. They're always looking to the future. So I think, A, all four of those guys are replaceable. And B, they're all gone next year. And this is one of the things Buffalo's about to experience. You start paying a quarterback what you're paying Josh Allen, it's going to be harder to build this roster. You don't get as much margin for error. And I'm not going to say Ed Oliver was an error, but you could make the case that he was, in that when you draft someone high in the first round, if they don't make it to a second contract with you, then, it was a short-term rental. Yeah. And, that's something that needs to be thought about with this team moving forward. Is they're in trouble along the defensive line, inside and outside, especially if Rousseau does not take a step up.
Yeah, or Boogie Basham.
Yeah.
Which so far he hasn't.
Well. Yep. Absolutely, both those guys.
Yeah, so Rousseau is the guy that really needs to take off this year.
Yeah.
They really need him to have his breakout, because we saw when Von Miller went down, pass rush disappeared.
Yep. And that's a huge red flag for a team that is going to get into a lot of shootouts.
All right, so other than that, Elam, they're expecting to take over at right corner opposite White. Hopefully White will stay healthy. If White stays healthy and Elam develops, they're in good shape. And keep in mind, Poyer and Hyde are getting a little older. That's why I like the move to add Taylor Rapp. And I think they're in pretty good shape, at least for this year, in the backfield.
Agreed.
Okay. Talk about the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins are really putting together, a quality roster and organization. And say what you want about the Flores deal, wasn't very pretty, however way you want to get into that, but we won't. The fact, though, is, Greer's been there a while, and so there's good stability there. It looks like they made the right hire with Mike McDaniel. The Vic Fangio addition should be a stroke of genius, even if he's only there for a year. Who knows if he'll get another head coaching job? Maybe not. Maybe he'll be there longer, because Dolphins have Vic Fangio there for a few years. That's going to be danger for a lot of other teams competing in the AFC. So I tell you what, we'll start at the top. Any way, shape, or form that Miami is, Mike White was brought in. Was the deal to bring in Mike White the only quarterback move that they felt they had to make for 2023?
I believe so. I think they're rolling forward with Tua. It's 95% about the medical, right? And that's something that we're probably not going to get access to at this point. Tua was headed towards an all-pro projection before the injuries really started to pop up last year.
Oh, yeah.
Small sample size. I'm not going to label him an all-pro, but it does seem like a really good match for the Mike McDaniel scheme. Mike White there, this team really was ruined by the quarterback injury last year. And I think if Mike White comes in, if Tua has another concussion or another injury, right, this team can still stay afloat. You didn't have that feeling with them last year. Skylar Thompson started their playoff game, right? You knew it was over at that point. Mike White's in there. You still think you have a fighting shot.
The interesting thing, too, though, is that they hung around with Skylar Thompson.
Yeah.
And that was pretty impressive.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, if things stay the way they are right now and Tua comes back, you're going to have a hard time telling me that Miami's not one of the three favorites to win the AFC.
I agree. And I'll tell you right now, I know Aaron Rodgers will be a Jet. Even if Aaron Rodgers is a Jet, I don't want to hear anybody telling me that the Jets should be better than the Dolphins as a preseason pick. That's nonsense. All right. The only way you can say that is if you believe that Tua won't stay healthy. If you're just going to say, I predict the Jets will end up better than the Dolphins because Tua hasn't proven he can stay healthy, and I predict he will get hurt again. You say that, I'm fine with that. But if Tua stays healthy, you can't tell me that the Dolphins are not a better team than the Jets right now. I'm sorry, you just can't. And I'm a Jet fan.
Yeah, and it's okay. The Jets are moving north.
Yes.
They're getting better, and I think they're in a good spot, both short-term, long-term, with Aaron Rodgers and whatever they end up doing behind him. But compare offensive, defensive personnel. You have Vic Fangio. Like, there's no advantage the Jets have over the Dolphins. You can't really spin that they do in any way, shape, or form.
So let's talk about the other potential needs now offensively. It's interesting because now they got that San Francisco backfield again for Mike McDaniel. Mostert and Jeff Wilson are there, and I don't see the thing though. I wonder whether we know how they can have the committee of approach. That's what San Francisco's done. So Mike McDaniel, of course, was there. So you wonder if that's what they're looking at, and if they do, then maybe they draft somebody. And let's keep in mind they do not have a draft pick at this point in time until pick 51 of round 2. So I'm still saying, well, you know what? A little bit later on, I don't know what their other picks are later, but you could still pick a guy, 4th round, 5th round. If you pick the right guy, he'll fit in perfectly with the committee approach. But if you if you see the right guy there, I mean, who knows? I mean, Miami might decide even to pull the trigger with their first pick.
Yeah, there's 2 philosophy questions I have with Mike McDaniel that I'm trying to use San Francisco as a template because that's where McDaniel's coming from, that Shanahan tree, and he'll put his own spin on things. He has his own flavor, but I don't think running back is at the top of the priority list. But if someone's there that can do it all, I mean, look what San Fran did for Christian McCaffrey, right? I don't think they are completely ignoring running back in the draft. If the right value player is there, I do think they'll go after him. But yeah, I mean, and these are 1-year rentals. I mean, what did they do at tight end with Mike Gesicki, right? I mean, he's gone, and they have Durham Smythe. Is that really your number 1 tight end, or is it like
not in this draft,
right? Or is it like Cincinnati, where it's like, hey, we just aren't not going to use the tight end as a feature position in this offense?
You're right, because they didn't really seem to use it when Gesicki was there.
Right, and I'm not a huge Gesicki guy anyway, but it's interesting to see. Like, I always like watching year 2 of a regime, especially, I mean, coaching or general manager or both, right? It's hard to really get a full gauge on what their philosophies are with personnel year 1. But if you get 2 years of data in, you can start to really see, all right, yeah, they don't want to put a lot of resources to the tight end. They don't want to put a resource into the running back. But as of right now, based on using San Francisco, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, right, I do think there's a spot for their first pick or even a trade up for a tight end or running back.
And also right tackle.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, that they've got to do something about the right tackle spot. And if they were to go right tackle with their first pick, being that it's pick 51, Bergeron could be available, you think?
Yeah, Bergeron could be there. DeJuan Jones could be there. Darnell Wright from Tennessee could be there. Anton Harrison. That's like that second group of tackles that I think could start in year 1. I think they're better than what they have out there. I mean, right now they're really going to put out Jerron Christian or Austin Jackson. Those would be my primary backup options I would feel good about. I also think there's an opening at guard. Liam Eichenberg, he failed at left tackle in year 1. And him and Robert Jones are going to have to battle it out. And I don't love either one of them. I do think you can make it with them, right? But this could be another spot where you're drafting a tackle and you let them compete for 2 different spots, right? Darnell Wright is funny. I still have not come around on him the way some have. I mean, some are saying he might be the first tackle drafted. We'll see. Athletically.
By the way, he has that. There are probably some scouts, and they'll do this. There are some scouts that will look at him and go, oh. I mean, because he doesn't have the appealing,
it's not smooth.
Big, I'm going to, run you over. I'm a physical freak, or he just kind of looks like, I don't know. He looks like a guy that, was he a 6th round draft pick? That's what he looks like.
Yeah, he's floppy. And, I saw that at the Senior Bowl. And every now and then I'm asking, am I watching the same tape? Am I watching the same guy? Some of these guys love him. And who I related him to is Tevin Jenkins, of the Bears, who started off at tackle, did terrible, and moved him inside and excelled. And I think he might have a similar trajectory. Like, everyone's saying right tackle for Darnell Wright. I think he deserves a shot there first. But he's a guy that, if he is in the 2nd round, would be a smart pick here. You let him compete for that right tackle job against 2 guys you hope don't win it. right? And if he doesn't excel there, or one of the other guys do excel, you can shift him inside. And I think that's where you see the best football out of him is in a phone booth. But out in space is where I get a little worried with him.
Okay. Over on defense, you take a look, and the defensive line, I think, is in pretty decent shape. They really need Ogba to stay healthy, because he's been a big part of their pass rushing over the last few years. The Bradley Chubb trade was a smart one. They made the signing for David Long. But the big news, of course, was the trade for Jalen Ramsey. And that was, again, a very smart trade. I mean, that's you put Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey on the field at the same time. Wow. You're going to have a hard time locating certain. I'd hate to be maybe the nickelback out there because he's going to get a lot of work.
I mean, he was an undrafted free agent last year. He was probably the biggest surprise of the undrafted free agency period last year, Kohu. So, you have Nick Needham, who had successful early in his career, coming off a couple injuries. Ball hawk at safety, and Javon Holland. I don't think the league knows, or people outside of Miami truly know how good this kid can be. That trade for Ramsey, the Vic Fangio signing to be defensive coordinator, David Long coming in at inside linebacker, and the ascent of Jalen Phillips. Like, this is why I think Miami needs to be. It's not just the offense. I think that this organization as a whole has done such a good job of saying, hey, we are going to air it out, score a ton of points, but we're not going to ignore the defense, right? This defense on paper is scary good.
By the way, what do you think about Raekwon Davis? Raekwon, he got off to a good start, but I don't know what's happened to him the last couple of years. I don't know if it's scheme change or what, but do you believe that they should be looking for a nose tackle?
So on my number three need here is that they need a backup nose tackle.
Okay.
And it's not someone that I would say needs to replace Raekwon Davis, but his career has been up and down, and kind of knew that on him coming out of Alabama. He's got a really unique, odd body type for playing nose tackle in a three-man front. He's enormous, has a lot of range, better athlete than people think, but when he gets sloppy, when his technique is just a little bit off, he doesn't have the margin to play with. So that's why you see the spectrum of his game is really hot and cold. And effort's not an issue with him. Maturity's not an issue. It's just there are certain body types that it's really hard to play inside. And he's got that body type, and I would love to have someone behind him that you feel good about coming in if he is having a bad stretch of play or he needs a break.
Okay.
They don't have anything behind him at nose tackle that scares anybody. So I think that's a really important need for the defense overall. I think maybe even the top one. And Bradley Chubb is the other one that, his best success was under Fangio in Denver as a rookie. Injuries caught up to him. Von Miller getting hurt kind of altered his game a little bit. So can he get the most out of Chubb like he did years ago? If not, Malik Reed is not the answer to offset the pass rusher on Phillips. So
he's just a good
little third down guy
player,
that gives you guys 10,
Jalen Phillips is the one that is
he could be a star.
Yes.
He could be a star. He might be the next star pass rusher in the NFL. Had to see it first, right? We're talking about projection, might, maybe, hasn't done it yet. So those are really, I think, that the top needs on defense is just kind of what they did on the back end with Jalen Ramsey and getting lucky in the undrafted free agency period. They need a year like that along the defensive line.
What do you think that they don't like, or are they either concerned with, or they feel he just needs more time, and that's Channing Tindall? Because they went out and got Long, and Tindall hardly played last year, and we're still not even sure where he's playing, even though I believe I forget where. I remember I actually had this conversation with one of the viewers about this, because he didn't play. There was, I guess, some miscommunication as far as where he fit outside, inside. And I remember doing research on that, and then I just forgot what I talked about. But he was actually hanging out with one of the groups. I forget whether it was the outside guys or the inside guys. But anyway, the fact of the matter is they there's something about what they saw last year that they're just not confident in that he's anywhere near ready.
What Tyndall's game is, it's built on speed, explosion, closing in on the action. What his game is not built on, and he did not play a lot at Georgia. Remember, he was really kind of like a one-year guy there.
Yes.
Because the linebacker room
Freak
was so
athlete.
stacked with NFL
Yes.
talent.
Yes.
But is, his ability to make reads and be able to take those first 2 steps in a productive manner post-snap. He's often on the wrong side of blocks. That's one thing you see on his tape a lot at Georgia. And the limited time that we saw him last year, preseason, right? Even in camp, some of the camp reports was he couldn't get off blocks, and that's because he was on the wrong side of them, right? He doesn't get that initial angle advantage, and that's all instincts, right? If you want to dumb this down to simple terms, is he doesn't have that instinctual feel where David Long, that's what his game is known for. He's also not the most durable linebacker in the world, so you have to have a little bit of concern there. That I think Tyndall is more maybe Jerome Baker's backup, right? If he goes down with an injury, kind of the skill set wise, get him in space a little bit more often.
Okay.
But you can make the case that there really is no backup for David Long if he goes down, which he has done the past few years.
All right. So defense, I mean, I would still, though, wouldn't you bring in another nickel at some point, unless they feel Needham could be a insurance policy? Because even though he had such a really good rookie year, you never know how he's going to do year 2.
And he's going to get a lot of action.
And he's going to get a lot of action. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a veteran presence on that depth chart at nickel would be an excellent idea if they can find someone that's available. And every year there's defensive backs that shake free in training camp / when the rosters get cut down. So that might be a longer wait.
But bottom line is, if you're looking at and look, this was sort of like Cleveland. The roster's really good. So if you were going to pick some teams that they don't need the first round draft pick, Miami's kind of one of them.
Absolutely.
And that's why they made the deals that they made. So but overall, what would we would probably say offensive line, running back, and only number 1 tight end if they feel that they want to use that number 1 tight end, like we would think that they might want to. Otherwise, defense is really just all about depth.
Yeah, depth. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's the perfect summary. Is what is their philosophy, running back, tight end? If it's X, then use them in the draft. If not, ignore it. Offensive line is a must. I think that's where they need to start the draft off, and then you just keep trying to find those. You can find quality contributing linemen, especially nose tackles. When I just got done talking to someone about my defensive tackle stack, and there is a cluster of 3-4 nose tackles that will be there day 3. That can contribute right away, too. They just don't have the upside of doing anything more.
Yeah.
That's okay here.
And that's normal. So you don't have to worry about drafting a nose tackle early. Okay. Right. Unless they're really, really, really special.
Special, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the New England Patriots. And the Patriots, things were kind of quiet there for a little while. And then we heard the Mac Jones news. And you just never know. When it comes to Bill Belichick, the specific kind of rumor that was talked about, that's one you could actually believe. It's like, wait a second, somebody, a player on the team went outside of the organization on Bill Belichick. That's not good. And it's not like Mac Jones has been this Tom Brady type quarterback for Coach Belichick. So, what do you think? What do you think about quarterback? Do they add another quarterback to that room?
Man, I kept refreshing my phone waiting for Lamar Jackson, which gets traded to the New England Patriots.
I can see that, though. Bill Belichick would definitely make a move like that.
That would definitely be a Patriots move.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, man. No one respects Belichick and what he's done over the past 2 decades more than me. I mean, I really do think he changed the game in a lot of ways. But every year that him and Tom Brady spend apart makes me think that his time is nearly done. And we had these expectations that, hey, New England's going to figure it out. They're going to pull that one move that's going to get them back to the postseason, back to the Super Bowl. And every year it doesn't happen. I think that the idea, it gets solidified that without Brady, this system does not work, or without the elite gamer quarterback, this system will not work. So I would give this organization a lot of respect, a lot of props if they pull the plug on Mac Jones and go out and make an aggressive move for a quarterback in this draft. Now, does Belichick want to start over with a rookie quarterback at his age? At his, there is not really a veteran option. I don't see any trades happening between now and then. It's too late for that. So it's hard to talk about the Patriots draft without bringing that up first, but I just don't know what the options are. I mean, would you hope that someone falls? Do you fall in love with Will Levis, a local kid?
By the way, is that relationship, does the timeline not add up with Bill O'Brien at Penn State recruiting Will Levis?
When he was at Penn State, I don't think that timeline lines up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was Will Levis came to Penn State.
That would have been a couple of years after.
Yeah.
Okay.
A few years after. Yeah. So that's a good thought. That's good outside the box thinking by you.
Yeah, you never know.
But I'll tell you what, right? As we get closer to the draft and the mock drafts come out, right? There are not going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10. I would say 1 or 2 of them are going to slide further than people think.
Levis is the guy.
Levis is likely the guy. New England is the team, right, that could trade up from that teens into the 11, 12 area and take that quarterback that falls. And this is where they got Mac Jones, right, in the middle of the first round. They waited for him. I think they're going to have to make more of an aggressive move up because I think the Commanders are going to be in a spot where they might want to go grab a quarterback as well. So there might be competition to trade up for one, but it's hard to ignore that possibility. We could definitely talk about what else they need on that roster, but Mac Jones, Bailey Zapp.
Yeah, they're going to add somebody
in this division.
Yeah.
Right. You really think in this division those guys are going to beat the quarterbacks?
I'll say this, and I think that Mac Jones still. I think people got too crazy with Mac Jones early on because he was doing what we all expected him to do. Is he was ahead of all the young quarterbacks when it came to being cerebral,
right,
being coached correctly, being on a winning team, being efficient. But he wasn't that guy that was going to jump off the page and be like, all right, well, eventually the other guys were going to slowly work their way to start potentially, while Mac Jones was going to get off to a great start or a nice start. But then you don't know, where was he ever going to really reach? How far was he going to reach? I still believe that he has the capability if he's surrounded by a really good team. Mm-hmm. And I will say this, though, about what you were saying with how they looked. I think we should give them definitely this year because Bill O'Brien is back.
Yeah.
There's a lot more stability within the coaching of this team this year than what last year was a mess. The whole thing about defensive coaches coaching the offense, and it was ridiculous what was going on behind closed. I don't know what they were doing, and it showed on the field. So, but I don't think there's any question that if they don't go after a Lamar Jackson, that they are going to add a quarterback. And maybe they do say, Hendon Hooker. That's going to be the interesting quarterback because I think the only reason Hendon Hooker is not as expected by most people to be drafted ahead of Will Levis is only because of the injury/age. Yeah. That's it. If he was healthy and the same age as say Will Levis, 9 out of 10 scouts would have him rated ahead of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thought. I mean, I think he's going to be one of the wild cards of draft weekend. He's getting flown into cities, teams that are picking the top 10 right now. So that might even be a guy you have to trade up for. We're saying, is he going to fall to the second round? His range right now is early second round to top 10. And you don't often say that about a quarterback, but
I think he might actually get drafted ahead of Will Levis. It's very possible.
That'd be an interesting bet. I'd like to see what those odds are because you might get a good value bet on that.
All right, let me know if you find it. I'll put some of my money on it. All right, the rest of the offense. They did add James Robinson, which was a nice little under the radar move. They've got the other kids from last year. So I don't really think with some of the other issues they have that they have to be worrying about running back. And as far as the receiver situation, they went out and got Juju Smith, which was a nice move. So they got Thornton from last year. And I don't know. I look overall, though, And I still wonder whether or not they have to add like a big time guy, and that could be with their first pick.
Yeah, I mean, their top four receivers last year combined for 119 catches. That's how many Tyreek Hill had last year by himself, right? They lost Jacoby Myers to Las Vegas. They lost Nelson Aguilar to Baltimore. These are two top pass catchers the past 3 years, right? So Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, solid players, both free agents next year, right? So past this season, you're really looking at Juju Smith-Schuster and Tyquan Thornton, right? And they're basically on the opposite sides of the spectrum. You don't know what you have in Taekwon, other than the fact that he ran a fast 40, and Juju is on the back nine of his career. So, and you know and he doesn't offer a big play downfield threat.
No.
So, wide receiver to me is their number one need on offense. It's not so pressing that they have to. They're not shopping hungry. They don't, but they are sitting in the spot of the first round. If they're going to ignore quarterback, that's probably right around where the first receiver is going to go. So if New England walks out of this pre-draft process saying, hey, we really like one of these receivers a lot, right? There's a good shot that he's going to be there with the 14th overall pick. And
who fits best at receiver for New England?
A slot. Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he'd be he is Julian Edelman to me. That's the name that always pops up to me when I'm watching him play. Not the fastest, but definitely the quickest, definitely the best route runner, and just a menace after the catch. And in this offense, I think that's what they're going to try to do with Mac Jones. He's not ever going to be a Josh Allen chuck it downfield type. Get the ball out quickly, yards after catch, and that is Smith-Njigba's. That's his game. So that's a spot where I think he's going to go to Tennessee or New England when I'm kind of looking at where I think the first round is going to go.
And then they added Rife at right tackle, so I don't really think they have to do a whole lot on offense unless they want to build with some depth on the offensive line. Gesicki was a nice pickup to go along with Hunter Henry. So you know how they like to use the tight ends there. So on defense, though, I said this on when we were talking about New England a couple of months ago, and I know one of the viewers disagreed with me about Christian Barmore because we talked about Barmore kind of just being okay. I mean, it's just an okay player, but they didn't have anybody special. I don't know if that viewer how old he was, but I just remember a lot of top New England defenders on the defensive line that were really special.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, to me, what they're missing. They're missing that special player up front. Judon was a really great move a few years ago. He's been a menace as a pass rusher. Mm-hmm. And Uche's okay as well, but they could probably use a little bit more depth in edge rushing. But New England needs to go back to finding. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen in this year's draft. There's no one like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, the edge, there are a lot of quality edge options in this draft.
Edge options, yes.
That's not what they need. They'll find depth, and I'm sure they will. Yes. They'll use a pick on an edge guy. But inside, one thing Belichick has done, yes, he's had some monsters inside, but he has also created a lot of value with mid to late round picks along the defensive line or street free agents that other teams did not want. I do believe defensive line needs a body or two, a difference maker or two. It does come down to Barmore. We have seen enough out of him to say, hey, he might be the guy, but we have not seen enough out of him to say that he definitely is the guy. So that's something that just needs to be watched over the next year. Defensively, I'm more worried about their defensive backfield and at corner. Now, I know Jack Jones flashed last year. Jonathan Jones is a solid player, right? But one thing Belichick has always really tried to get is a number one corner, a guy that he really feels like, Gilmore, Revis, right? A lot of these good Belichick teams, they had that number one guy that at least you knew that role was solidified, and then you could scheme around other things. They don't have that on the roster right now. And in this class, again, where I think some of these top corners in this class are going to go, that is a sneaky spot that I think a lot of people are not looking at with the Pat's first pick and just knowing Belichick's history.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, I'm not even sure they have a number two.
Yeah.
Based on how they've had, like you said, those really big time DBs.
Yeah.
They don't really have that that because he was usually that number one, like you're talking about, and then they always had that sneaky number two guy that was really good that nobody talked about. And they also had that enforcer guy in this at safety. Now Duggar's done a nice job. He's gotten better. He's found a role. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they need to add now depth wise. I think they're okay, but they don't have the premium guy.
Yes,
that you're talking about.
I mean, even consider safety, right? They lose McCourty to retirement, right? And I really think that he was like a glue of that secondary. And physically, yeah, he could be replaced. But alignment-wise, like who is going into that role? You know, everyone is quick to say Adrian Phillips, but when you talk about where these guys played, all right, Phillips, he aligned in the box, kind of like a dime linebacker type. Every now and then you'd see him drop back into a free safety role. McCourty was almost always the guy that was on the back end. Duggar is your wild card, right? Your joker. He's all over the place. Are you really going to put Phillips in that McCourty role, a role that he has not been playing his entire career? You know, so if not, if you want to keep Phillips in the role that he's been in the past few years, who was playing that spot when McCourty was? Is it Jalen Mills? Do you really trust that? Jabril Peppers? No, right? So that's a spot. I just think the entire defensive backfield, you could spend, you know, out of their first 4 picks, you could use 2 or 3 of them on back there, and I think it would work out.
You know, I don't know when he's going to get drafted, and I know you really like him a lot. But in our last draft, mock draft,
yeah,
I think either the player that you took, which was Smith-Njigba, or the player I took right before you, Branch.
Yeah, Branch is definitely a Belichick guy.
Yes. So he would love to get Branch on that team.
Yeah, I mean, Branch is what I think Adrian Phillips is, but Branch is so good that you can move him around. Phillips won't be there that much longer anyway. You're not going to make any long-term decisions based on him. There are a few of these versatile safeties. It's not a strong safety group, but there's a couple. The guys at the top, Brian Branch and Jartavius Martin from Illinois, are like those nickel safety types. Cornerback experience, can also play on the back end as free safety. Those are Bill Belichick type defensive backs. So my money is on them using their number 1 pick on a D-back unless they want to get aggressive at quarterback.
Yeah, so quarterback, but slot wide receiver. And again, if Smith-Njigba is available, it probably would be surprised if he doesn't go to New England.
I would be if he's there.
And we've talked about this before, just to remind everybody, and I know the Patriot fans don't have to be reminded, but Bill Belichick, as long as he's been there, has had a very hard time drafting wide receivers.
He has.
I mean, he's had a lot of misses, a lot. And that is something to keep in mind. But I think if Smith-Njigba was available, that's not good. Oh, I have a hard time drafting a receiver. No, I got to imagine he'd pull the plug and go that route. So, yeah, I think we're in agreement based on this draft. Slot wide receiver, quarterback, maybe if they go that route, and definitely the defensive backfield. All right, let's talk about the final team in the AFC East, the New York Jets. And the Jets still on a holding pattern for Aaron Rodgers, but this isn't going to hold too much longer because the draft is almost here. And there's just no way the Packers are going to go past this draft without making the deal for Rodgers. So, as far as the Jets and what they've done in the meanwhile, the big moves they made really was just Lazard at wide receiver, kind of for more. It was like Lazard for more. And when they trade more, they get the extra second-round draft pick that they're going to use for the Rodgers deal. And then they also, on defense, traded for Chuck Clark, who will basically take over for LaMarcus Joyner. On offense, if we're looking at what this team really needs more than anything, is they have to build more young linemen, offensive linemen. I think that has to be the priority because look what happened last year when they had those injuries. It just wasn't a good situation for them. And if you have Aaron Rodgers out there, man, you better protect them. And then on defense, we talked about this quite a bit. And that's why I had Branch going to the Jets because I think the Jets need a playmaker in the back seven because C.J. Mosley doesn't give that to them anymore. and they're not getting it from any of their safeties. So they need that nickel hybrid type player, that guy that could really cause turnovers and things, and a chess piece that you can move around in defense more than anything. And they just added Quentin Jefferson on the inside, but to me, that's just more bodies. They're going to want 9 or 10 rotation bodies like last year, but they still need another defensive tackle.
Yeah, definitely a backup nose tackle. Maybe even someone to compete with Jefferson for that starting job, right? I love Jefferson as your number one interior guy coming off the bench, especially with the versatility he brings to the table. If you kind of peg him into one spot and he's the guy that's seeing the majority of the snaps inside, I'm a little bit more concerned there than some. I don't think he's the answer.
Well, that's sort of like the position of John Franklin Myers.
Right.
Because even though he's always looked at as a defensive end, what makes him a special player is when he moves inside on passing downs. That is why he's such an asset to their team.
Right. And I think just the other feather in the cap for this defensive front is you trust the Saleh with how well he is, how developed and how experienced he is at really rotating a defensive line and getting the most out of everybody. So no matter who they bring in, if they use a pick on defensive lineman, I'm sure they will at some point. That's kind of, to me, the least of their concerns is the defensive front, especially you have All-Pro and Quentin Williams up there who they're going to lock up next year or maybe even prior to the season. But
they had the 2 kids from last year who they would definitely expect to make a second move year 2, and Michael Clemens and Jermaine Johnson. Those guys, yeah, I agree with you because they're going to need those guys. They need some more edge rushers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that comes down to Carl Lawson and Bryce Huff. I mean, what are we doing there, right? I'm a big Bryce Huff fan. Do I want him starting? Probably not. But having a guy like that rotate in on your edge is a huge asset. But Carl Lawson, considering what you're paying, considering that he's a free agent next year, that's a spot that you're going to want to start to think about, as early as the first pick. Maybe, I think they're going to go elsewhere, but it's a thought that if Lawson's not going to be in the long-term plans, you don't want to go into the next offseason saying, hey, we don't have anybody out there. Jermaine Johnson needs to step up. Michael Clemens needs to step up. And until they do it, I say this all the time this time of year, until they do it, you don't have it, right? And and you can never have enough pass rushers, especially in this scheme. So, inside, outside, defensive front probably needs another body or two.
Yeah, because if you look at it, they're pretty much set now on the defensive backfield with the exception of adding some depth guys.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's it. And they only use 2 linebackers most of the time, and they re-signed Quincy Williams, so they're set there. So yeah, defensive. So if they go defensive tackle, who are they looking at with their first pick?
I mean, if you're talking about the skill set,
is there somebody that warrants that pick in the first round?
I mean, you're going to keep hearing me say AA from Northwestern. Adebawore is a solid type football player. Inside, outside. Solomon Thomas, but with much more juice, is who I think this kid can be. And remember, that guy was a top 10 pick when Saleh was there. And
he was a big disappointment, Solomon Thomas.
Yeah, he was. And right now, he's a great locker room guy.
That's all. That's all he is.
Have a good guy in your depth chart, right? But Adebawore is someone that, again, I don't think they're going here in first round. But if you're going to tell me who would they take there early, who's the guy that meets the value, the scheme, and the grade, it's Adebawore from Northwestern. Day 2, day 3, I think this is a spot where you could see Byron Young from Alabama, a guy that can play outside, can play inside. Again, you're looking for inside-out versatility. And one thing Saleh always likes is guys that uses their hands very well. And Young is probably the best handwork defensive lineman in this draft, right? He's not the best. He's not the most powerful. But in terms of techniques, those guys come out of Alabama and at the very least know how to play, right? They don't always reach their ceiling. Sometimes they get a little overrated from that program. But Byron Young is the guy to keep an eye on leading up to draft weekend for them.
And then, again, on offense, they can't rely on Hardman because of the fact that he's going to play kick returner. He did have an injury situation last year. But the big question is going to be, I think, once they make the move, I guess, for Rodgers, because I'm kind of surprised Corey Davis is still there, to be honest with you. With the contract that he's making, it's like, are they just kind of waiting until they either try to fill in someone else and then they'll let him go? And he's like an insurance policy in case they can't either draft the right guy or sign the right guy.
They do financially. I do think it helps them to cut him after June 1st. So you could designate him as a post June 1st cut if they want to. But I think he's been on this team just in case they don't get Odell Beckham. I did think Beckham was going to wind up in New York, but that contract Baltimore gave to him, I mean, it shocked me how much money he ended up getting, and that just basically priced the Jets out. That's what I'm assuming happened.
Thank goodness.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't interested in that. I just no.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. But
they
Corey
have enough
Davis
talented players in that receiver unit. Unless, again, I'm even happy with Davis, but if they can improve, I'd even be okay if they use a draft pick at some point. The first few rounds, I'm okay there. Especially, I would think slot though. That's where they probably go if they're going to use another wide receiver.
Yeah. What I like about Garrett Wilson is that, I mean, the guy can line up anywhere.
Yeah.
So you really don't need to go into a draft or a free agency period saying we need a slot, we need an outside guy, because I mean Lazard also he's lined up the slot plenty in his career as well. So they really can go in any direction they want in the draft. They can say, hey, let's just get the best receiver. I think they could use another deep threat. Just a little bit more speed to stretch the defense. This offense is going to be very much, everyone's forgetting about Breece Hall, by the way, but if you can get someone on the field to really stretch the secondary and create more space. And that's where I think Garrett Wilson does his most impact, right? Those short to intermediate route running, and then you let him do some damage after the catch, and you'll get more space to work with if you have someone that scares the defense vertically. Jalen Hyatt probably a little too rich in round one, but we've seen crazier things happen, right? If you can get a true downfield threat that really takes keeps the safeties on their heels, I think it helps out the offense as a whole.
Yeah, and if when Aaron Rodgers comes here, by the way, I would not give up yet on Denzel Mims.
Okay.
Because if Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback, that could then get Denzel Mims into a situation where all of a sudden he's got a Hall of Fame quarterback thrown to him, and he made good progress last year. Little steps, but he needed to make those. He needed to make any sort of positive steps after the way his career had started. But anyway, it's all going to come down to Corey Davis. The fact is, offensive line, to me, has got to be the number one position that they've got to infuse more youth there, especially to determine what they want to do with the center position, because they're talking to Ben Jones, which I think makes a lot of sense. There's no way they're going into the season with Wes Schweitzer as their starting center. I'm sorry, they're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Schweitzer, his best value is as a versatile interior backup, and I believe that's why they brought him in. Safety center is definitely on the table for the draft. I do think they're going to go the veteran route. Does Aaron Rodgers want to play with a rookie center? I doubt it. He wants someone up there that can just mentally and physically handle the rigors of playing that position. So, but offensive line, I agree with you. Becton is obviously the wild card, right? But we're now 3 years into his career and he's barely played any football.
He's got one more year left.
If I'm the Jets, right, I'm going into this draft acting as if he's not on the roster, right? And if you have if you're blessed with the problem that you have too many good offensive linemen, it's a great problem to have. And I believe last year you would have signed for that. Oh, we have too many good backups on our line, because I don't think there was a team in the league that was ravaged by injuries along the offensive line more than the Jets. Yeah.
And tackle would be a really good, or a tackle guard, just like we were saying with the other teams, guy that can play tackle or guard, but tackle definitely.
Yep. So if you're going to ask me where are the Jets going in round one, where should they go? I think offensive line is going to be the move with that first pick.
Okay, it is time to talk about the NFC East as we wrap up our team needs, and we're going to start with the team for Big D. The Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys had a very successful season. They made some progress under Mike McCarthy, and there's also some more changes taking place for this team, and that includes, of course, Ezekiel Elliott. He won't be returning, and we can kind of start there offensively, Dave, because they need another. I know they signed Ronald Jones, but you're not going to count on him. So you got Tony Pollard, and you need another guy. You can't just have Tony Pollard going out there and getting an exorbitant amount of touches. He's better suited as a number one. So at what point could Dallas go after a running back?
It's a great question. The Cowboys, I think they can go in any direction early in the draft. I mean, you can make a strong case for any one of 3 or 4 spots. Running back to me is not one of them, only because Pollard is going to be the guy, but I still think they want him to be the sports car. They want a pickup truck to kind of get all the dirty work done inside. And it works for them. And I think we need to get away from the thought that Ezekiel Elliott needs to be replaced. The old school Ezekiel Elliott. He was just another guy the past year or two. And I know Cowboy fans are going to get angry about that because they got emotionally attached to him. He was the face of the franchise for a long time. But take Ezekiel Elliott, the player, the past 2 years, he won't be that hard to fill. His production, his status, what he did for the offense. Ronald Jones, I do think, can do it. I do think they're going to add a running back at some point. But considering the value of the position and this running back class in particular, I think they wait till day 3 to bring in a running back, just like they waited for day 3 for Pollard, and it worked out.
And I understand, but I do believe it's on the table.
Okay.
Just knowing Jerry Jones.
Who, Bijan? Thinking about Bijan Robinson?
I don't think he'll be there.
Right.
But if he was, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the kid was from Texas. So, yes absolutely. I can see that as a Jerry Jones move. Yes. But even Gibbs would fit in nicely with the Cowboys. Yeah. So it would not surprise me. But overall, I think offensive tackle is definitely, now all of a sudden an important need. Tyron Smith's getting older. You wonder last year, it was a bad year for him, and he is getting older. And so, he's not going to get any more healthier as he gets older. So they got to figure that out. And Terrence Steele, same thing. I mean, he actually came from nowhere to give him some good production. He's a restricted free agent, so you don't have anything past those guys. So you have to have another tackle here. And I also think that they should try upgrading the center position. I just don't think that the kid is all that great. And I don't think it would be a surprise if they decided to do that. And on defense, they could use a nose tackle. The guys they have there, Jonathan Hankins, he's on the old side, and a nickel cornerback as well, because with the Stephon Gilmore deal to go along with Diggs, that's a pretty nice one too. Kelvin Joseph, you have to hope that he can develop even more. But Jordan Lewis, I think you can kind of add another guy there, unless Bland is a guy that they have high hopes for.
Yeah, Bland proved to be a playmaker as a day 3 rookie. I mean, a lot of benefit came his way of what that defense, what was around him. But the opportunities that he had, he led the team with five interceptions last year, right? So I believe defensive backfield, it is one of the top needs on the team. I have one of the top 3 needs. I don't think they're going to rush into filling that role. But offensive line is where I'm most concerned. Like you said, center, both he and Terrence Steele are free agents next year. And Steele is coming off a torn ACL, and I know everyone's saying he's going to be ready by training camp. That's an aggressive timeline, right? You tear your ACL as a 330-pounder in December, and you think you're going to be ready by training camp. I think he'll be ready in September. So I don't think they need to go to the draft saying we need to find a week 1 starting right tackle. But I would be prepared, right, especially for a guy that big, and he's on the stiff side already. I would say one of the weaknesses of his game is the lower body engagement, the natural knee bend, is, get a backup option for that, right? We keep saying this, right, but this is a perfect opportunity for a college tackle that might project inside but could play both. This is the spot that Dallas needs to address because Tyron Smith is gone soon. I would even say next year, in 2024, he's not on this team anymore. The plan for Tyler Smith has always been long-term left tackle. So you open the door at left guard, you draft someone this year that, if you needed to, could play right tackle instead of Steele, and then long-term future, you have your starting left guard. So this is a spot where, one of these tackle guard conversions is a spot that I would almost guarantee is going to occur in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, they're in big trouble on the bench. I mean,
right.
The let's go guy, I don't know what they think about him, but that's really all they have.
I personally did not like him at all, but they like him. They like let's go just verbally, right, through training camp and practice. They like Josh Ball, too, as an athlete. But when you're talking about football and playing natural and being able to beat NFL linemen, I don't think either one of those guys are the answer. I would rather say, hey, if they work out, great, but let's go to the draft saying they're not there.
So let's say definitely another tackle. and a guard that might even have experience playing center, or a center that you think
Yes.
could play guard. Maybe
Yeah.
you could
I mean,
push, the number one guy.
Yeah, just a versatile offensive lineman is really what I think is the best answer for this team. Steve Avila from TCU, not really quite sure where he's going to go. They might have to make an aggressive move for him in the second round if they want to get him. I think he's one of those classic. I mean, every year
Too
you see
early
good,
for him in a late first.
I do. I know. I mean, I love offensive linemen. To me personally, I wouldn't knock everyone knocked the Tyler Smith pick last year, right? That was a pick that nobody saw coming. He played well last year. A lot of penalties, but we knew that was coming. That was his
so
deal.
maybe they'll do it again.
They could, and it'll get criticized. And then I'll tell you what, this team drafts offensive linemen at a very, very successful rate. So if they draft Avila, I would actually give this organization a lot of props. Like it's not a sexy move, but it's a move that helps them win football games.
And then a tackle, we've talked about the same guys, so we know. But yeah, again, I mean, if you haven't listened to the other shows, run through some of the tackles.
Matthew Bergeron was the college tackle. I just think he has a guard skill set and body, but he can play both. I have him as a first-round tackle, but I do think he can shift inside. Jalen Duncan from Maryland, Tyler Steen from Alabama, and even a name that we haven't talked about yet today that I boosted him up after I did my last kind of final rankings for the sacks for the offensive lineman, with Asim Richards from North Carolina. He was a late addition to the Senior Bowl roster, played left tackle there, but has some experience inside, and I think he just has the play style and the body type of a guy that can play both spots. He actually reminds me a little bit of Tyler Smith.
Nose tackle. Again,
Nope.
Do you agree? But obviously they can wait until the later rounds. But do you agree they got to do something up front, and that would be the one spot?
Yeah, nose tackle is probably – I mean, I love what they have on the outside, so yes. I don't think they need to touch that. But inside, I mean, they're always looking for extra defensive linemen. This team is always kind of just like one guy short. I can't believe they lost Ridgeway last year. That was – I think they tried to sneak Ridgeway onto their practice squad last year, and Washington claimed him off the waiver wire because you have to go through waivers to get to the practice squad. And he ended up being their starting D tackle last year. That's the exact guy this team needs right now. That was a bizarre move to me. I remember he was a 5th-round pick, and they tried to get rid of him a couple weeks into the season, I think. So that was just I would love to get a backstory on why they did that, why that happened. But definitely need to add some beef behind Hankins and Osa Odegiz. Don't even want to get his name wrong, but they need more depth on the defensive tackle spot.
Also, by the way, do you think that they'll add in this deep class of tight ends, even though Ferguson's the guy they like, do you think that they'll add another tight end, and could they add that guy as early as the first round?
Tight end is on the list for round one for them. I like Jake Ferguson. I like Peyton Hendershot. I don't like them as starters. And I believe there's a big drop-off between them and Dalton Schultz. So that's a reason why I think this offense is going to go backwards a little bit. Is Dalton Schultz was more important to that offense than people think. Runner as a receiver and a blocker. And Ferguson and Hendershot, they're not going to hold up as blockers all year, especially in line.
Who will be available?
Darnell Washington.
You think he'll be available at that point? I
think he's got a shot. Yeah. I mean, I think Darnell Washington right now is going anywhere from pick 18 to 30. It's somewhere in that range. So, I don't like Kincaid. I think you're just getting another Ferguson Hendershot type. Obviously better, but just a better similar. Musgrave is the question mark. You just don't know that much about him. Didn't play that much. And Michael Mayer, if he makes it, I mean, one of those guys is going to be available when they're picking, at least, right? Maybe even 2 or 3 of them. So yeah, tight end is on the list, and I wouldn't be surprised at all for them to use that pick there.
Okay, that's the Dallas, and we're not talking about quarterbacks, right?
No, not yet. I think Prescott gets another year to ascend, but Prescott's the kind of guy that you might not love him, but if he's not there, this thing falls apart. And don't tell me about Cooper Rush's record. I don't want to hear about it.
No. All right, let's talk about the New York Giants. And the Giants had a nice season, surprised a lot of people, and that, of course, had a lot to do with the maturation of Daniel Jones, thanks to Brian Daboll. And so when we take a look at what they did in the offseason, they made the big trade, big enough trade to bring in Darren Waller to start at tight end. That was nice. They added a couple of free agent receivers, including Paris Campbell, who just needs to stay healthy. And defensively, they made some more depth kind of moves and a couple good, fringe kind of starters, including maybe Okereke could have been the top name that they added. So, I think it was a pretty productive offseason so far for the New York Giants. So what they have left, let's start on offense. First of all, let's start at running back, because just because they tagged Barkley, we know how that usually goes. A lot of times these guys get tagged and they're gone the next year. So could the Giants be thinking about that running back spot? I would think that they would, but I would think that it would be one of those things where let's see if we can get a guy in the middle rounds. Maybe we get lucky and we grab someone in the middle rounds so we don't have to worry about using a high pick next year if we lose Barkley.
Yeah, anytime a player's franchise, I would encourage a fan base to say, hey, this guy's not going to be here next year. I don't know for a fact, there is a shot that he signs a 3-4 year deal, whatever, right? But like right now, if you knew Saquon Barkley was not going to be here in 2024, what's your outlook on the position in this draft, right? You also look at the current depth chart that the Giants have. Matt Breida, Gary Brightwell, good players, role players. Not, the line I use there, you're not making decisions based on them around the draft. So, I'll give you a little sneak peek. We did a 7-round mock draft for the Our Lads draft guide. And that took forever, by the way.
I can imagine.
In the second round, I had the Giants, right? I gave them Jahmyr Gibbs. He was there. I think round 2 is as early as you could see a running back taken. Not necessarily for someone that's going to contribute, although if you get the right skill set, you don't want Saquon on the field for, 80-90% of the snaps every week. It doesn't work. He's not that durable of a player, right? You even saw a few things catch up to him last year. It was his best season since his rookie year, but he got banged up. And I think you always need a plan B. And this is a team that's now going for it, right? If you ask them, they think they can win the NFC East, right? Bitter taste in their mouth after getting their butt kicked against Philly in the playoffs. So you bring in a running back to offset when you have Saquon Barkley, but also set up your future and just check that box for 2024. You don't ignore that, right? This is a front office that is very much about positional value, thinking ahead of the curve. Let's get ready for next year, not just this year. And running back is definitely a part of the discussion. Not round 1, but round 2, it could happen there. At some point, they are going to add a running back, and it could be anywhere in the draft, including their second pick.
And because they added Waller, they don't have to worry about tight end.
Yep.
And they added Campbell, also depth pieces. They added Jamison Crowder. They added Jeff Smith. So believe it or not, I think there's one thing, though. It all depends on the philosophy. But I still think that if like a Quentin Johnson was available, a guy with a little bit of size, more of a size versus speed, because they got the speed. They got the little guy speed guys. They need, I think, a bigger body. And I'm not saying Johnson's the biggest guy, but, maybe you're thinking of that first round, or I don't know if there's like a second, third, or fourth round guy with size that you think would be a good fit. But they could go into the regular season with this group and feel okay. But I just wonder whether or not they're thinking about adding a guy with size.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about a wide receiver room, you want to think about a basketball team, right? You want your big bodies, you want your small bodies, you want your possession guys, right? You want your guys after the catch. When I listen to Joe Shane talk about the receiver position, he really does kind of pound separation, quickness, get open, do things after the catch. So you can go in two different directions. Now, when I think about who's going to be there, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, those are the two names that kind of pop up in my head. Zay Flowers is just another body like Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah, that's not, yeah, that, no.
No, on paper, it just doesn't seem like the smartest idea. No. Yes, could it be fun in certain looks, right? Are they going to get open and make things happen? But I think
we're not doing the run and shoot here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the passing game needs more balance. And as Johnson might not measure it in like Randy Moss, but the dude plays big.
Yes.
His wingspan is unreal. He looks like an avatar out there. And he's a monster after the catch. He's probably the best receiver in this class at breaking tackles and creating on his own. So Johnson is a guy, he's a little raw. And there are some things about his hands that bother me a little bit. Yeah. Still a first-round grade for me. I think a great situation for him because he's not going to be thrown into the X receiver spot and say, hey, you're the starter. They have enough bodies. I think what I like this front office did in the offseason is they patched a lot of holes. They're not long-term solutions, but they are not going to force a rookie into an every down role right away. They can kind of develop him a little slower if they need to. The name that I think, if they don't go there round one, Cedric Tillman is a name, another big body that had a 2022 season that was really kind of marred by a lower body injury, a weird ankle injury that doesn't come up. He's full strength now. That's a name to keep an eye out for Giants fans, that he would be a really good fit if they need a little bit more size and a little bit more downfield threat in this offense.
Yeah, and we're not talking about Isaiah Hodgins size either. So
Right. Yeah.
He's tall.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. So,
Yep.
But again, if they decide to pass on it, then we'll know how they feel about their receiving unit. As far as the offensive line, you wonder, it's only 1 year. And they do need, talent-wise, they need more talent on the interior. Definitely. They can use another guard to eventually take over for Glowinski. If they feel their third-round pick last year is their long-term answer at the one spot. I think Bredesen is just kind of a guy that's waiting for maybe an upgrade at some point, but maybe they'll live with him for another year or two. And Neal, again, I don't know if they now that they've got him in the room and they've had an opportunity to play him, what do they think about him? Do they think, all right, he'll be fine. He just needed to get out there. We're going to work with him. He's going to be okay. Are they thinking about moving him inside? Are they really afraid now that they made the wrong decision and that they have to add another right tackle in the draft? So I don't know. I think that's something that we won't know until draft time.
Yeah. I mean, the interior of the offensive line, they lost their starting center in Feliciano. Not a huge loss, but it is the guy that started in there. They lost Nick Gates, who was a pretty valuable piece, really good story. Came back from a severe broken leg injury that almost ended his career. But look at all the names along the offensive interior, especially that left guard.
They haven't. They lost the two guys, and they haven't replaced them yet.
Right, and they're going to sell you on Ezadu, Jack Anderson, Shane Lemieux, Ben Bredesen, right? And, hey, great competition, and I think all those guys do make it a deep group, but they don't have the answer yet. And Ezadu is probably the highest upside guy player in that draft, second-year guy out of North Carolina. He's coming off a neck injury, right? And you got to be a little careful with those things, especially with the offensive linemen. Bredesen, like you said, not the long-term answer. Don't think Shane Lemieux is either. He's missed more football than he's played. So guard is definitely a spot that if they have, let's say, Osiris Torrance falls down into their 25th pick, and they're convinced that he's a good enough guy that can come in and start right away, I think you run to the podium, you hand card in, and you just try to make this offensive line as dominant as possible.
What about the other kid from North Carolina? The fifth-round pick.
The kid that Esteem Richards?
McKeithen?
Oh, McKeithen, yeah. I mean, he tore his ACL during their preseason scrimmage at MetLife, right? And new turf this year. Hopefully they can put an end to all these torn ACLs there. But they liked him a lot athletically. Physically, the gifts are all there. Has not proven to be a really consistent football player, right? The skill set's there. The tools are there. But he hasn't put a lot of good football tape together over the stretch of the season yet. So if you get something out of him, great. I actually think they might view him as their backup tackle in time. He's got that skill set in that body.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And on defense, they are in a good spot with their top three guys. And really overall, because of the move they made this offseason as well. So I think they're in pretty good shape along the defensive line. And as far as the edge rushers, Thibodeau was their pick last year, so that was nice. Ojulari can add a little bit of that to your room. So overall, I think that, look, you could always use another edge rusher, but I don't think it's like a major issue for them. Middle linebacker, you're not going to rely on Jared Davis, that's for sure. McFadden is the guy to keep an eye on. But middle linebacker, if they think McFadden is just kind of like a role guy, that could be a major pick for them. That could be a round one pick.
Yeah, if they did not sign Okereke in free agency, you'd walk into this draft saying this team needs a linebacker.
Major, yeah.
Between Gerard Davis, you get the veteran presence there. They signed him late in the year. He flashed, but you know what he is at this point in his career. The McFadden, really good interior run defender, but the further out into space he gets, especially in coverage, there are issues. The one name to keep an eye on is another guy that tore his ACL during training camp, was Darian Beavers from Cincinnati. He was playing so well during training camp last year that it looked like he was going to be the starting inside linebacker over Ty Crowder.
Okay.
So he's gonna, he'll be 12 months removed from the ACL. That's a name to keep an eye on, and I loved him. I thought that was the best value pick of the Giants draft last year because of who he's matched up with schematically. Wink Martindale uses this versatile linebacker as well as anyone. He was an edge rusher at Cincinnati. He was an inside linebacker at Cincinnati. He's physical. He's nasty. A better athlete than people think. So that's a name just to keep an eye on as he comes back from the injury. Again, another spot with a lot of competition, but they don't have the answer yet. So linebacker is on the list for adding another body there. And you have to kind of think what does Wink Martindale like to do with his inside linebackers? They need to be good blitzers. And I think that's a big part of their pass rush is being able to kind of create that, matchup problem where they can beat a one-on-one blocker and red to the quarterback.
Well, if they were looking, if he was looking for someone like that, round one, would we be looking at Simpson? Would he be the top guy based on what you're talking about?
It's tough. Drew Sanders is the guy that I think that would probably be the best schematic pick. I personally, if the Giants say, hey, Giants need to take an inside linebacker, who's the best fit? Jack Campbell, to me, would be the safest answer. But Drew Sanders is a guy that, like Beavers, right, if they're going to try to get another option like Beavers, he's a pass rusher. His best tape at Arkansas was as an edge rusher. And I think he had 9 sacks, right? He was the 5-star recruit at Alabama, couldn't get on the field, goes to Arkansas, plays the off-ball linebacker spot that would occasionally move up to the line in pass rush situations, and he first-team All-SEC. Still doesn't completely know what he's doing, but I think Martindale works with that guy kind of really well. So Drew Sanders is probably the linebacker I think fits the scheme the most. Round one is a little rich for him, though.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. And then nickel cornerback, that is definitely a position of need, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, Darnay Holmes in a contract year. He's been in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, you can't count on him anyway.
Can't count. A lot of penalties. That's been an issue since 2020. Julian Love, I think that was a bigger loss than people think. Just that security blanket of, hey, he's a backup nickel. He's a backup safety. He can play the free safety. He can play in the box. They don't have that guy, and there's a couple of them in this draft. So that's a name to keep up. They signed Bobby McCain to play that role this year from Washington. He's a holdover. I think he's a guy that, okay, fine, we'll use him. But if you can draft a rookie that is a better football player than him, also keep in mind, Xavier McKinney, he was drafted by the previous regime, and he's missed more football than he's played in his career so far, even though I think he's going to be a focal point of that defense. Him and Azeez Ojulari are both drafted by Gettleman, and they both are now injury issues. And at some point, because you're paying a quarterback now, you can't take risks on injury issues.
So what you're saying is you say McCain might play more nickel, and then Belton plays alongside McKinney?
I think that there's a good shot that could happen. I think that's an option, right? You
Okay.
get Holmes out of the mix. I mean, this defense rotated so many guys in and out based on matchups last year. Like, you'd see Belton get, 80% of the snaps one week and literally would not be on the field the next week. So I do think right now they just don't have
Gives him an option. Okay.
Yeah, they're just moving puzzle pieces around. So McCain gives them that versatility, and I think they would need another body. But I think you can also make a case they need a number one corner, right? I think Adoree Jackson's going to be gone soon. Even if you do like him, right? I think he's a number 2. And Cordell Flott is kind of like the wild card of the mix. And again, when you don't have a number one corner, you don't have a number one corner.
And give me some potential DBs that the Giants could be looking at in the first round.
I mean, Brian Branch would be a great pick if he's there. I don't think he's going to drop that far. A corner that kind of plays that trail and run role very well. Can mix you up at the line, but can also hang with you speed and size down the field. I mean, you're looking at Ringo from Georgia. You're looking at Joey Porter from Penn State. Deonte Banks is an option. He's had a great pre-draft process. I think he's a little raw. But Julius Brents is a day 2 guy that I love for this scheme. I love the ethos that dude plays with. He's one of the most physical kids you're ever going to see on the outside. And that Tariq Woolen size-speed combo that Seattle had last year, Brents has very similar profile to that. He's not as fluid, but that's a spot where I think Giants and Wink Martindale in particular will pound the table for us. We need another big physical corner on the outside.
And okay, and then a nickel?
Nickel, I love Riley Moss from Iowa.
He could go late first round.
I think not late first round is a little early for him. If they're looking for a first rounder, I like Jartavius Martin from Illinois. I'm a little rich on him. Not everyone has him as a first rounder. I do. He was a corner/safety at Illinois, best tackler in the group, and I think that he could be a really sneaky option for a surprise first round pick for the Giants.
Let's now talk about the defending NFC champions. So let's talk Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL draft. And we said this a couple of months ago. I mean, this team could have gone anywhere because there were so many question marks about free agents and so forth. So we have a little bit more information now to go on, but not that we have really any firm grasp on what they're going to do because this is still a talented team. But let's start with that defensive front because we know how important it is for them to have quality like 7 to 8, strong. And I'm putting Reddick in there as well. Reddick is an edge rusher. He's not no off-ball linebacker. He's not so linebacker that's going to sit there in coverage. So he's coming hard like Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett. And because of that, I think they're fine. But where there's issues after the loss of Hargraves is on the inside. And I think that I could see them actually upgrading the inside of their defensive line, maybe even twice, including their first pick.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that's just going to throw more talent into the trenches, even though they're already very good there, it's Philly. And this is why they're so successful. And this, I mean, I'm actually glad they're having some success right now because I'm huge on this. Just always feed the line. You're always going to find a spot, especially on the defensive line, to rotate these guys in. And it seems like every year teams they lose their mojo halfway through the year, back third of the year, because they don't have any depth along the lines. And, you can make the case that they need to fill that Hargrave hole right now. But even if they feel they have a solution there already, they're going to pump resources into the line. This is what they do.
Yes. It all depends on whether or not it's going to be with their first pick or not.
Right.
That's the main question. And look, they have pick, was it the 10th pick?
The 10th pick.
And the 30th. So they get that Saint pick. And so on our last mock draft, we had the Eagles going. Now this was about a few weeks ago. We had them going with a corner. But they brought back Slay and they brought back Bradbury. And it looks like those guys are going to be there now for the next couple of years. And then they signed Greedy Williams. So I'm not so sure cornerback is the spot to go with at this point. So I think safety is a little bit more important. But they had Terrell Edmonds, so that was nice. I just don't know whether or not they are comfortable. Like, have they decided that Reed Blankenship is now legitimately going to be getting starters reps? I like Blankenship. It was a nice story. Did everything at Middle Tennessee. So maybe that's the case. Undrafted player. Justin Evans is a guy that disappeared for a few years. So I'm not sure what they got there. But yeah, I think they could use a safety, but when I'm just talking about defense overall, I guess the other question is going to be Nakobe Dean. Is he ready to take over the middle linebacker role? Is that what the whole plan was? And then they went out and signed Nicholas Morrow to add to the linebacking unit. So depending on that, after the losses of TJ Edwards and Kazir White, do you agree? Do you think that once we look past defensive tackle, there really aren't a whole lot of glaring holes in the back seven?
Yeah, just questions at linebacker. Those are two big questions because TJ Edwards and Kazir White, they were big parts of that defense. And I know some Eagles fans that were not happy about losing both those guys. They knew they were not going to be able to re-sign both, but to lose both those guys and put all your eggs in the Nakobe Dean, Nicholas Morrow, Christian Ellis, Sean Bradley, Davian Taylor basket. Those are two big question marks. So I think another body there would just kind of give you a little bit more insurance in case one of those guys does not work out. And Dean, you're talking to someone. I had Dean as a second rounder last year, and I thought this was one of the best values of draft weekend. I know there were some knee concerns with him long term. So I do think it's going to work out there. I love Dean. He did flash a little bit. He saw a little bit of playing time last year, but even me, a supporter of him, I don't feel that good about I don't feel fully confident about that projection of him being a really good player. So,
and are they better? And so we would be looking at with their 30th pick.
yeah.
And so we're looking at what? Maybe again, we were doing this again. Are we looking at a Simpson? Are we looking at? Would he be like the out of the top three? Sanders, Simpson, and what's his name? Campbell from Iowa. Would Campbell or would Simpson make more sense?
That's a good question. In terms of what they lost in T.J. Edwards, who I think was a more important player than Kaiser White, a little bit harder to replace, I think Campbell fits that mold a little bit more. Simpson's more of the athlete. I mean, right now, I don't have first-round grades on any of the linebackers, right? I think they're all second-rounders. I could see one going, but they might have their choice. I mean, it's a good possibility. They're going to have their choice of one of those three guys at number 30 overall.
All right. And do you agree with the defensive backfield, or do you think they need to add a safety?
Yeah, I'm not a huge Terrell Edmonds guy. I don't think he's a long-term solution. Blankenship, like Nakobe Dean, still a little bit of an unknown, even though he did play a little bit more last year. So I agree with you. A safety at some point would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, by the way, we're not talking. Is there anybody that they could be thinking about at defensive tackle with their first pick?
Well, so number 10 overall. I mean, Adebawore.
How about using the one of their picks, could be the second first round pick, to move up and get what's his name from Alabama? Jalen Carter from Georgia, excuse me.
Oh, Jalen Carter. I mean, if Jalen Carter drops, this is NFC East fans.
Again, we're at 10, and if he's if we're through 5 or 6, and if 3 quarterbacks go in that top 5, he could be available.
Right.
Could the Eagles move up 3 or 4 spots? And do you think that would be something that they should consider? Because this is an organization that would make a move like that.
Absolutely. I mean, Howie Roseman is one of the most aggressive traders draft weekend. He's been that way for a while. And considering what they have, I mean, you put Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter back on the same line, with Fletcher Cox and Milton Williams, even Contavious Street. Yeah, absolutely. That would be an Eagles move. If Carter actually gets past Seattle and Detroit, which I'd be shocked to see.
Yeah, because we both kind of like him going to Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah, and if not Detroit, but that's definitely a move the Eagles. I would even say I'm surprised they don't do it. But you'd have to trade up with who? Vegas, and I think Vegas would take Jalen Carter in a heartbeat, unless if this is a character issue for some teams.
You never know.
You can see it happening.
And again, we were talking about adding potentially, giving you another first-round draft pick. Just move down a couple of spots.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Eagles could afford to do that.
Yes, they could. And it would make that defensive line scary good.
A lot of other teams that they would be potentially trading with, we could get another pick. We'll do that. Yep. Okay. All right. Offensively, then, you take a look, and running back, I think that if they added a running back who also was very good in the passing game, I think that's a no-brainer for them with one of their first couple of picks.
Right. Yeah, the running back, it's funny. This is a team that a lot of us don't want to give Bijan Robinson to because they just don't draft first-round running backs. But in a year where you have 2 first-round picks, so you have a little bit of a luxury to work with, in an offense that obviously needs a number 1 back, right, in a team that is just so close to winning the Super Bowl, getting Bijan Robinson almost seems unfair, especially in this offense. I think he's an ideal fit for this offense, right? I mean, Bijan can fit into any scheme, we know that, but this situation with Jalen Hurts and not having to carry the ball 25 times a game, also catching the ball out of the backfield, right? This would be another Jalen Carter. It's almost like an embarrassment of riches, right? If they are going to be in the market, if Jalen Carter falls, or if they just sit at 10 to get Bijan Robinson or Jalen Carter added to the best team in the NFC, I mean, it almost seems unfair. But philosophy-wise, they might just not go there. So they might have to wait till day 2, day 3 to get a running back. But I would bet that they're going to add a piece. Rashad Penny, they signed in free agency. You just don't know what you're getting there. I think it was a 1-year deal regardless. Trey Sermon, not a factor. Boston Scott, great depth chart running back. Gainwell is kind of a wild card. You've seen a lot of hot and cold with him, and they really haven't trusted him in the 2 years. But, Miles Sanders was there, so maybe they are going to give him the keys to the bus this year. I
still think, though, when you're looking at teams, and we've covered them all, not many teams don't have like, hey, this is our number one running back and we know who he is, or they have two really good guys. Not many teams have, because I don't care. Boston Scott is not a really good number one guy. So
Right.
the Eagles are one of those very few teams that could
Yeah.
really use an upgraded running back.
Yep.
So
especially, I mean, we're talking about, let's not forget, when we're talking about an upgraded running back, Bijan's the best back prospect we've seen in a long time. We're not talking about, oh, yeah, a good running back. We're talking about a special guy.
And maybe if they don't trade up and the guy and somebody's not there, maybe they trade down and pick a Robinson.
I mean, with Howie Roseman, everything's on the table, and that's kind of what you like about him.
Also, offensively, the guard situation, because Juergens is now going to get a chance to start at guard, at least until Kelsey retires. Then you think Juergens more than likely moves back to center at some point. So you would think this is a good year to add a guard.
Yep. I think if I remember correctly, I gave them or you gave them Torrance in one of our mock drafts. And this is as high as I could see him going. And it would be such an Eagles offensive lineman pick. And it would just, I mean, if anything, they lose their starting right guard to Pittsburgh in free agency and they bring in this kid and all of a sudden their offensive line is better, right? Cam Juergens, right? Like him a lot. He was not picked to play right guard. He was picked to play center for when Kelsey retires. So can you go into the year and say Juergens is there? Sure, that's fine. But if Skoronski falls down, if they really have a high outlook on Torrance, right, they can definitely go there. And just look at how this offensive line has been built, right? A lot of high picks. They value the offensive line. They know that's why they win a lot of games. They know that's why Jalen Hurts took that big step up into an MVP caliber quarterback.
They've lost a lot of depth over the last couple of years.
They do.
So they need to replenish that depth.
They do. And I think Torrance makes a lot of sense here with that number 10 pick.
Yeah, that was our first mock draft.
Okay.
We had him going pick number 10. And then overall, they could use a number 4 wide receiver.
Yep.
Because, again, like we've seen with the Bengals and other teams, if there's an injury to one of their guys, then there's a hole. So keep that in mind. And also just a few other things, but we've been through most of what the Eagles need. Okay, we'll wrap it all up with Washington. And the Commanders / Redskins / Generals are going to have the opportunity to decide what to do at quarterback. What do you think from what you've heard? Is this still a big question mark? Are they really going to go? No, look, I'm a Sam Howell fan. I think he deserves a shot if he was coached right and he's had the sit-down year. But I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know if they are all in on Sam Howell or not.
I mean, the guy started one game. He was a 5th-round pick. And I know, after the 2020 season, right, heading into 2021, Sam Howell was the guy, according to many people, right? Oh, that guy's going to be the top pick.
That's when they were stocked, the Tar Heels with talent. Yep.
Right. And, he fell out of favor, and ends up being a 5th-round pick, starts one game, and now he's the guy, and this is the guy. I was surprised the team did not make an aggressive move at some point in free agency because I think Ron Rivera is on his last legs. You have new ownership coming in. He just constantly is kind of just like meddling around 500. The team just never looks like it's better than the previous year. They just always are kind of stuck in the same spot. And that will be the case if you don't make an aggressive move at quarterback or you get lucky. And Taylor Heineke was never going to be that guy, right? Fun player to root for, but he was never going to be that guy. Sam Howell, I have the same feeling, right? Fun kid to root for, but I don't think he's going to be that guy. I think his upside is what Baker Mayfield has turned into. That's really what I see Sam Howell as. So, if there's a team that we could see, there was a report that Schefter just came out with today that 6 teams have reached out to Arizona about the number 3 pick. I got to think Washington is one of those teams. And if you look at Ron Rivera, and I don't know how much say he has in the quarterback, he is a defensive coach, right? If you look back to his history in Carolina, what quarterback did he have the most success with? What kind of quarterback? It was Cam Newton. And this is where I could see a team. This is the team that I think if they're going to make an aggressive, really aggressive move, for Anthony Richardson.
I guess it all depends on how much power he still has in the organization.
Right.
And would you draft a guy like Anthony Richardson that you know can't start week 1, and then Rivera could be fired by the end of the season and you never even saw Richardson?
Right. And it's a fun thing to think about, because does this give Rivera an extra year? It's almost like, hey, you got to give me another year without Richardson and another year with. This also sets up Sam Howell to be the guy for a season, right? And you move forward with Richardson. I mean, if you really are just going to move forward with Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell, you are not going to win 6 games next year. And so I think you're getting fired regardless. I think an aggressive trade up for a quarterback at least might give you another year window.
Unless this is one of those teams they're thinking about that quarterback room next year.
Right.
You know,
right.
we got the Giants, we got the Eagles, we got the Cowboys.
Yep.
Let's just be the team that worries about next year. And a new coach.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is the team is good enough to defend their way into 5-6 games. They still have a nasty defensive line. They just locked up Deron Payne to an enormous contract, right? Montez Sweat is probably next. So it's a tough, I actually do think the team is solid. It's a solid roster. I don't think it's great, but they don't have the quarterback. And that's why I was surprised. I thought that's where Lamar was going to end up.
Well, look, if they don't make the trade, though, this could be where Levis goes. This could be where Hooker goes. That's still possible. We're taking a look also. The only other need they have on offense is with this tight end class. It would be surprising if they did not go after a tight end. They don't have to do that, of course, with the first pick, but second pick, tight end. Agree?
Yeah, first pick is an option. They could be the team that takes the first tight end off the board.
Who could that be if they did that?
I mean, where did Eric Bieniemy come from, right? New offensive coordinator comes from Kansas City. What tight end in this group kind of blends that Travis Kelce size, speed, ball skills? And it's Luke Musgrave. This would be a surprise first-round pick, but we see surprises every year.
Yeah.
Dalton Kincaid doesn't have the size. Mayer doesn't have the speed. Washington doesn't have the suddenness, right, and the route running prowess. The one guy that is this kind of a big unknown, but probably has the highest ceiling in the group is Musgrave. And, crazier things have happened in the draft. He might be there in round 2. That might be a move that they make in round 2. But I believe you. I agree with you that this team is going after a tight end at some point in the draft. It's a major need on that team.
By the way, speaking of Bieniemy, don't you think that it's one of those situations where if Ron Rivera moves on, we know who the next head coach is going to be?
You think it's going to be him?
Yes.
You think that's why they brought him in?
I would be very surprised, especially if we're talking about if Daniel Snyder's still there.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
But how would that help his PR?
Right.
I'm the guy that hired Eric Bieniemy.
Yep.
Get off my back.
I give me some space. Yeah. I mean, the ownership situation is funny. I mean, I haven't been updating myself that much on what's going on there, but if and when they do sell, it's an even more it adds even more complexity to the idea of possibly trading up for your next franchise quarterback, especially from where the Commanders would have to trade up from. Yeah. That price tag would be enormous. So I mean, maybe they kick that can down the road, like you said. But
look, if I'm trading up and I feel like I could trade up to number 3, then I'm trading up to number 2 and I'm getting Bryce Young.
Okay. Not a bad move. Not a bad idea.
If I'm going to go all the way to 3, I'm just going to 2. I'm not stopping at Anthony Richardson. If I can go one more spot, give them a little bit more, and then I'm getting my guy anyway. Because come on, we all know who's a better quarterback. So
yeah, absolutely. That's not even close.
If Houston, like you were saying the other day, if Houston is actually
out on him,
a little bit unsure about Bryce Young.
Right. If Houston might go into this draft saying, "Hey, we want to wait till next year. The next year's crop,"
and Washington could be one of those teams.
And you know what? That trade does make sense because the ammo that Washington would have to use to trade up to 2 would give Houston so many assets that if by some chance they wind up at number 5 overall and they need to make an enormous offer to get to number 1 overall next year, they'll have all those toys that they can use.
On defense, they could use a little bit more edge depth. I don't really think they have much depth at all after Sweat and Young. A middle linebacker. Cody Barton is just a veteran that could just hold the fort, but they need a middle linebacker. And then cornerback is definitely, they could probably use 2 corners, actually, including a nickel.
Yeah. They cut ties, with William Jackson after playing at 16 out of just 34 games with the club. They traded him to Pittsburgh last year during the season. Benjamin St. Juste, Kendall Fuller on the outside, Danny Johnson at nickel. You could do worse there, but there's nothing behind those guys, and that got exposed last season. So this is another team that they don't have a number 1 corner right now. When you don't have one, you need to go get one. Cam Dantzler from Minnesota, that's not going to move the needle.
Yeah, who could be the number 1 corner? Because that could be who? Witherspoon could maybe still be available? Is that more Porter Ringo?
I think it's going to be more Porter Ringo. It sounds like Witherspoon is almost a lock to go top 10. So him and Gonzalez. So, yeah, I think you're looking at like corners number 3 through 5. Who's your top guy? You'll probably be able to get one of those guys.
All right. And then what if do you think it would be a smart move to also add a little bit more edge depth?
Yeah, edge depth.
Especially if they can't afford Sweat.
That's going to say it's edge depth, but it's also maybe a hedge on him and playing elsewhere in the future. Chase Young, still a believer in him, but you're talking 2 straight years of just not getting what you want to. One of them was injury related, and last year it was kind of an odd recovery process for him. I still think he could be a special player, but if you lose Sweat because you can't afford him, and Young does not pan out to be what you thought he'd be, you now have nothing there.
By the way, you were just talking about assets.
Yeah, there you go.
If they wanted to move up to Houston,
yep.
Montez Sweat or Chase Young, either one.
I do think if Washington makes the move, it's going to have to be more than picks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they don't have enough pick. They're too far away.
That's where you're in a good pick and you want a marquee player. We got one for you.
You're absolutely right with that because also trading them doesn't hurt your cap because they're on rookie deals. I'm really leaning towards Sweat more than Young. I don't think trading Young is a good idea right now for a lot of reasons, but Sweat on a rookie deal, your salary cap's not going to get hurt with the penalty of trading him, and he is a credible top 15 edge rusher in the NFL right now.
And if they added an edge rusher with their first pick, who are we looking for?
If they went first round with that pick, at that point in the draft, you're probably looking at a Nolan Smith, little undersized. You'd have to probably alter the scheme a little bit, but that's Jack Del Rio is definitely one of the minds that could do that. Tyree Wilson, I think, is gone. Miles Murphy is a guy that I, personally have said he's the top 10 player in this draft, but most people are saying he's going to be available at that spot. So, you take Sweat out, you put Murphy in. But hey, if they're trading away Sweat to get up to the top of the draft, they're not going to be picking the edge rusher in that spot anyway.
That is true. Well, that could be very interesting. Washington moving up, especially if after getting Eric Bieniemy, hey, if you had your druthers, who would you want? If we had the opportunity to get one of these quarterbacks, and then he tells you, and then you maybe go get him. So,
yep, absolutely.
Could happen. All right. Anyway, that's why it's a lot of fun speculating on not that we're not going to use trades in our mock draft next week because that would be too crazy. But this would be on the table. Dave, that's it for our team needs. We'll talk again. I'm running out of voice here.
Need to refuel.
We're going to talk again on Wednesday when we go over your rankings for the offense. And then we're going to talk defense on Friday.
Sounds good.
And look forward to it. So
yes, sir.
Appreciate it, Dave. Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Great job. We'll talk to you in a couple days.
Thanks, Greg.